Hi, I am Dr. Felice Gersh, your integrative OBGYN, and I'd like to talk to you about the burgeoning field of longevity medicine. Now, I've mentioned in the past that the whole world topic, so trendy now of menopause wasn't really a big thing back in the day because women didn't live long in menopause. Okay. So if we talk about longevity medicine, we should think about where we came from historically. And if we think about that, why did people die at such young ages? Well, there was very high childhood mortality, and that's because children, babies died of infectious diseases, they died of starvation. And in terms of infectious diseases, a lot of that was due to poor sanitation and hygiene, where there was a lot of contamination in, say, the water supply. So, one of the biggest longevity perks that we now get to enjoy, and hopefully will continue to enjoy, is clean water. So, I cannot tell you how polluted water shortens lifespans, okay? So, things like sanitation, having plumbing systems where people aren't pouring poop out the window into the street. That used to happen, okay? And people didn't wash their hands, they didn't know about hygiene, and they got infectious diseases. And they didn't have antibiotics. Antibiotics in the history of lifespans of humanity on Earth is a rather recent development. Well, now we have antibiotics, some of them, now we have some problems. We're getting resistant strains and such. But antibiotics have expanded our life expectancies dramatically. So when you just look at a couple of things in terms of longevity medicine, let's not forget the basics of how we came so far from having an average lifespan from birth in like ancient Rome or ancient Greece of in the early 20s to where we are today. So, if we look at basic sanitation, having clean water and clean air, we didn't have clean electrical appliances where we could cook without creating toxic fumes and such. So this is a big part of longevity medicine is to remember our heritage. Now, what about vaccines? Well, some have credited vaccines for among the biggest and best ways that we have lengthened our lifespans. So back in the day, people died a lot from smallpox. This was a huge deal. So when we think about vaccines, children died. I know this is not the thing that some people want to hear, but children died from so-called preventable diseases. People died from polio. That was a terrible thing, what happened during all the episodes of polio. Now, no, when's the last time you heard of somebody catching polio anew? And people did die from things like mumps and hepatitis and measles and Haemophilus influenza, some things you may never even have heard of, killed children. Now, sometimes they killed adults, but more children than adults. And that was because children don't have as strong as an immune system in general. And that was a big part of having a lowered longevity. I delivered thousands of babies back and still today in third world countries and in the United States more and more, unfortunately, there is maternal mortality. So women die in childbirth, women die in pregnancy. It's not a little matter. So we need to have, and do now in general, have excellent maternity care. And that's something that has to be continued because many women had shortened lifespans because of dying from pregnancy complications or in labor. And then, of course, there is the more pregnancies a woman had, the more risk she underwent. So having available contraceptives, healthy, and I'm always for contraceptive research, but not having a ton of babies actually prolongs women's lives. So every time a woman is pregnant, it's a high risk to her life. And it also depletes her of a lot of minerals and vitamins and such that go to the baby. So it's quite depleting. And there are some studies saying that women who have a very large number of pregnancies tend to have shorter lifespans. So it's not a nothing thing that we have contraceptives available. How about sterilization? Having the ability to have sterilized instruments to do surgery on people and understanding how to safely do surgery and have antibiotics so people don't have to die from things like ruptured appendix. That happened in the past. In fact, it was not a rare cause of death, having a ruptured appendix. When's the last time you heard of someone dying from that? Well, all of this contributes to longevity medicine. So when we talk about it, we need to think about where we came from and where we're going, and how life expectancy is so much longer now than it has ever been in the history of mankind. Now, let's talk about clinics and professionals who call themselves longevity experts or have longevity clinics. So, what are they offering, and how is that different from conventional medicine? Well, conventional medicine, let me start there, is mostly reactive medicine. And I'm not saying that's bad, it just is. It's not functioning in terms of prevention. It's not looking at all the different things that contribute to healthy longevity, or what we now call health span, living without chronic disease and disability, having vitality, having the ability to do what you want all the way through your lifespan. That's health span. Functional living, that you can do what you want. Living without function is not a good quality life. It's not what anyone wants. Having dementia, having serious chronic pain, being immobile, these are things that you can live with, but they're not things you want to have to live with if there's something you can do to lower the risk of having any of those things. So health span is optimization of quality of life, of health, so that you can do what you want and be what you want and live the life that you wish for as many years as possible. It's not about seeking immortality. It's about seeking a quality life for a hopefully long period of time. Now, what can we do to actually achieve that? Well, number one, we can't forget where we came from. So everyone who cares about longevity and longevity medicine, I say, must be an environmentalist. Now, why is that? Well, pollution, I mentioned having unclean water, air pollution, were big causes of early demise of people. You know, if you heard about the days when people were doing coal mining, which may be coming back, I wish not, because coal is very toxic, but coal miners would get black lung, breathing in all the dust from the coal, and they would die young. You know, people who worked in certain trades, you know, they would die from toxic metals that they worked with and so on. So we want to maintain a healthy environment in the workplace by having proper equipment and having safety rules and so on. That has made a huge difference in having healthy longevity. So we don't want to give that up. And we want to make sure that we maintain healthy air and water. What's the difference if you have, like you have oxygen available through a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, but when you get out of it, you're breathing polluted air and drinking polluted water? So that makes no sense. So we need to see the grand scheme of things for healthy longevity. So every doctor, everyone who cares about healthy longevity should be an environmentalist. So we maintain clean air and clean water. And we need to have healthy, clean food. That's another thing that has helped to increase healthy longevity, is not having tainted, infected food. I'm sure you watch the news, and every year there are some people, mostly children, not always, but mostly, who die from eating at a fast food restaurant that has food contaminated with E. coli, or the family buys lettuce or cucumbers and it's tainted with toxic bacteria that infect and then cause life-threatening and sometimes life-ending infections. So we need to have healthy, clean, safe food. So that's part of environmentalism. We don't want to have pesticides all over our food. So having agribusiness look at longevity practices, like having the healthiest food with the fewest chemicals and toxicants in the food is longevity medicine. We want to have proper built homes. We don't want construction to fall on us. We don't want our roof to literally cave in on us. This has happened in some countries. So we want to have a system in the country that actually has safety for construction and other products that we use, and car safety and so on. Because if your car's brakes fail and then you crash and then you die, that is not a good way to have healthy longevity. So there's so much that goes into healthy longevity that is not going to be typical of a longevity clinic. But if you care about healthy longevity, you should be thinking about these things, and you should be advocating for the things that actually are most likely to give you healthy longevity. We want to have access to healthcare. And the modern drugs, I mean, there are so many drugs that have prolonged life. Some of the amazing, and many of these have come out during my career lifespan, and that is drugs for high blood pressure, which they didn't have like 50, 60 years ago. Those kinds of drugs weren't available. And things like strokes and ruptured aneurysms were much more common. So do not underestimate the big pharma. I know they often get tainted and criticized, but the different drug inventions have really contributed to healthy longevity, not just antibiotics, but chemotherapy, immunotherapy, surgical techniques that have enabled us to survive. So these are the things that we must not forget when we think about healthy longevity. So what do I do in my practice? Well, I emphasize environmental safety and health, because everyone has to be an environmentalist. And we talk about that and the importance of getting clean food, and having air purifiers in your home, getting water purifiers. This is part of healthy longevity. Now, I mentioned food. So what kinds of foods tend to promote the most healthy longevity? Well, there's a few different types of diets that have been talked about. There's the forever lauded Mediterranean diet, and there's some different definitions of what that is, but basically lots of plant-based foods. That would be legumes and ancient grains and all kinds of vegetables and fruits, some olive oil and olives, and small amounts of dairy, small amounts of meat other than some fish. So that's kind of the traditional Mediterranean diet. Then there's DASH diet, there's MIND diet, but without getting into all the diets, which we can talk about another time, it's food that is real, food that is plant-focused. So the most important foods are from plants that are in the diet. And so lots of different things like beans and vegetables and nuts and seeds. And when I say ancient grains, I mean you cook them like rice, and there are things like millet and amaranth and quinoa and buckwheat. And if you don't have any problem with gluten and you get organic barley, that is also a superfood. So these are the kinds of foundational foods that give you healthy longevity. Now, concerning food, a big trend now, which is very appropriate that should be taught in healthy longevity and in longevity clinics, is time-restricted eating and various modes of fasting. So the fasting mimicking diet, which was developed at the Longevity Institute at University of Southern California, is definitely proven to extend longevity in mice and rats. Okay, now it's really hard to prove that something's going to extend a human life, because how do you do that study? But at least it's nice to know that rats can live like 11% longer. But we're talking about Healthspan, so we want to be healthier. So what do some of these things do, like time-restricted eating, fasting, mimicking diet? They harness your own intrinsic mechanisms for rejuvenation. So what else is a great rejuvenator? Exercise. They do studies with exercise. It beats so many things. Exercise can do better than metformin for controlling glucose. Metformin is good, but exercise wins. And what about mood? What about depression? Exercise does as well or better than standard treatments for both anxiety and depression. Exercise can rejuvenate mitochondria, the energy powerhouses of cells that also control cell cycles. Exercise helps with that, as does fasting mimicking diet. So, by the way, do hormones. So, the other thing is to optimize hormones. I always say hormones are the essential but not sufficient part of healthy aging. You can't just have hormones, you still have to do all the lifestyle stuff. What about sleep? Oh my goodness, there's so much on sleep. So, sleep is amazing for healthy longevity. During sleep is when you have the lymphatic system of the brain that drains out and gets rid of all the toxins that accumulate from the metabolism of the brain, which is very hefty because the brain is very busy making energy, right? So we definitely need to sleep. During sleep at 2 a.m. ish is when you get this giant surge of melatonin, one of the most potent renewable antioxidants of the body that has so many incredible benefits. But it won't happen if your sleep is cut short or you don't get to sleep until like into the early morning hours. You won't get that giant spike. So you got to drain all the junk out of your brain. You need that melatonin spike. You need to get all the proper phases of sleep. And that is critical for healthy longevity. So I mentioned sleep, I mentioned nutrition and fitness, exercise. What about stress? Well, if you live in a toxic, stressed life, that will shorten your life. We know all the different mechanisms. So, stress control through any form of meditation, through progressive relaxation, massage, acupuncture, vagus nerve stimulators, listening to soft music, and all these different things can really help with stress. We want to have an optimal immune system, so we want to try to lower our risk of dying from an infection. And having optimal hormones helps to optimize the immune system. One of the leading causes of aging and of ultimately dying is what's called immunosenescence, the aging of the immune system. And through all these different things I mentioned, and I put hormones definitely into the mix, especially estradiol, but progesterone too. And I'm talking about women. For men, of course, it's testosterone. But I don't talk too much about men. That's not my specialty. But what I can tell you is estradiol is critical for maintaining optimal immune function. So we don't want to have immunosenescence. So what else is really important? Well, those are the mainstays. Well, what about all this other stuff that you get at the longevity centers? Okay, what about, I've talked about peptides, and what about ozone? And what about some of the advanced testing? What about things like doing blood transfusions from younger people? What about some of the other things that they're doing with rapamycin or other drugs that are being used? Well, I think they're not quite ready for prime time. Maybe they will be, but not yet. Now, is there a place for hyperbaric oxygen chambers? Absolutely. Just getting into one every single day for a while and owning your own. Where's the data? Okay, I can't say there's harm, but I like to also have some data to support why you would do it. I'm not saying there's no place for any of these things. I'm saying, is this really part of the most sensible way of trying to age well? I don't think so. What about ozone infusions everywhere? For I don't think so. Show me the data. I'm not saying there's no place for it ever. I'm just saying no, not at this time. And I've talked about peptides. The GLP-1s are peptides. Peptides are just chains of amino acid of a certain length, like between 2 and 100 amino acids in a chain. So they do a million different things. I'm sure there are going to be many future pharmaceuticals that will incorporate some form of synthetic version of peptides. I'm not saying there's never going to be a place for them. They do a million things in the body. But to just inject yourself with these random products, you don't know the quality, you don't know what dose is right, how long you should take it, the interaction with other things. Like, you're turning yourself into a total guinea pig. I think that there are better ways to be healthy. Every peptide is made in the body. Why do you need it? Why can't you just make it? Well, it turns out if you do all the other things I described with lifestyle and hormones, you will make those peptides, like you'll make GLP-1s up to a certain point. If the cells that make them are all damaged, then they can't be rejuvenated. Well, maybe then there is no way to get an adequate amount. But for most people, if you do the right things, if you exercise, if you have hormones, if you eat the right diet, you will make your own peptides, okay? You will make all the different peptides. And it turns out that in women, estradiol is actually the key to making optimal peptide production in all over the body when you have the right amount of hormones. So I've talked about peptides. I don't want to go into it more, but I'm saying there will be pharmaceuticals with peptides, and there could be a place for them. But just injecting for healthy longevity, that makes no sense. And if you take them orally, the vast majority, unless they're specially treated in some way, will just be dissolved and turned into amino acids through the digestive tract. And even if they don't, who's making this? What dose should you have? There's no human studies to show safety. And I'm all about safety. Remember, I took the Hippocratic Oath of do no harm. And we have alternatives that are safe, that are proven, even using drugs like rapamycin. Maybe there is a future for it. But right now, we don't know how to dose it, how to use it. Can these possibly give harm? Yes, because it can trigger autophagy. Continuous, unending autophagy is bad for people. You know how we talk about too much of a good thing is a bad thing? So a lot of the different approaches in longevity clinics can be a little over the top. And how about some of the tests? Well, I've talked about getting total body MRIs or doing some of the like sort of general blood-borne cancer delivery type tests where you're looking for cancer type cells or some kind of way of marking cancer in the blood. I'm not saying there's no future. There is actually a present time for using them for following certain cancers, and it may be on the cusp of really being a breakthrough. But right now, the chance of you being saved by any of those tests rather than being harmed and having false positives or false negatives, the negatives outweigh the positives. But I'm willing to change my mind. I'm looking at all the different new ones that are coming out, and there certainly could be a change in my mind, but not yet, okay? You have to always show me with any of these things that the benefits outweigh the risks, okay? You have to do more good than more harm, and so far I haven't seen that yet. So I'm not saying never, I'm saying not right now. Can you take someone's young blood and then put it in you and then you'll become younger? Well, maybe that can do something, but I think exercise, eating the right food, having the right hormones in general is a better approach to healthy longevity. You can't just create farms of young people either. They need their blood. So we got to think about those things. Is there a place for plasmapheresis? Yes, there is, but not for everyone. For special situations, yes, but not across the board. So we have to think, where should we go? What should we do for a healthy longevity to create that health span? And for most people, it doesn't require getting imaging tests randomly to just look for something. Remember, with doing total body MRIs, the chance of finding a cancer or something that will save your life, it's 1 in 100,000. The chance that you will be harmed with a false positive incidentaloma that leads you down the rabbit hole is somewhere between 20 and 40%. Okay. I call that not such great bang for your investment. So I don't think so. But if people want it, I'm not telling them they shouldn't get it. I'm saying, why would you do that when your risk is greater than your potential benefit? But I just want to inform so you can decide. I think there are some wonderful longevity centers. And then I think there are some that maybe they need to rethink it. Or they just, is it all about money? Is it about really helping people? Where's the data? Is this really evidence-based? And are there other less expensive, safer, tried and true, science-backed approaches to healthy longevity? I always say, why don't you do the low-lying fruit first? Why don't you emphasize the lifestyle medicine and emphasize everything I started with, talking about having healthy environment with clean water, clean air, safe food supply, and having vaccinations so that you don't have diseases that kill and really harm people that really don't have to happen anymore. I'm for personal choice, but I'm for lots of education so people can make the right choice for themselves and for their society, because we all live together in a society of humans and animals trying to do the right thing so that we can have healthy longevity. I'm not here to be negative about longevity clinics. I just want to be honest that some of them may not have, we'll say credentialed people running them. Some do. Some are very evidence based, some are less, So there's been a lot in the news lately about the whole world and the whole realm of longevity medicine. We all want to live healthy, long lives. We cannot be immortal. But there's so much that can be done that isn't being done. Why don't we start with the basics before we start going off into left field using tests, doing different therapeutics that are really fringy in terms of their science and their evidence. And maybe you can spend your money in better ways, but it's your choice. I'm just here to give information.